I'm Marcus Ellery, 27. The cousin who paid for half the graduation. The champagne flutes clinked like wind chimes in a breeze I wasn't invited into. We were on the rooftop terrace of the Winslow Hotel, wrapped in golden twilight, with white linen tables gleaming under string lights. My family had outdone themselves. Everything looked curated: the floral arrangements, the charcuterie tower, the engraved ice sculpture of a scroll and cap. It was all for Savannah, the golden child of our generation, the valedictorian of our bloodline. I stood by the far corner, near the emergency exit. My name tag partially peeled from my blazer. I'd flown in early to help set up the slideshow, covered the florist's last-minute invoice, and made sure there were vegan hors d'oeuvres for Aunt Claudine's unpredictable digestion. I even offered to host the thing at my own downtown apartment, but Mom said it didn't have enough sky. "Marcus, we're starting the toast," my sister Laurel called. Her voice crisp, practiced. "You're good, right?" "Yeah," I said, thinking she'd misunderstood the way I hovered near the doorway. "I'll come join in." She gave me that managerial smile she learned from dating too many finance guys. "Oh, no. I mean, just hang there for a sec. It's close family first. You know." I blinked. Close family. She turned and walked back without another word. Uncle Dennis tapped a spoon against his glass, summoning silence like a bishop at Mass. "Let's raise a glass to our brilliant Savannah. Our pride, our future doctor, our summa cum laude." Everyone cheered. Savannah smiled in that composed, magazine cover way. Each family member took turns offering mini speeches. Aunt Claudine tearfully remembered the spelling bee Savannah won at age 9. My brother, Julian, talked about carpooling with her through high school. Even Uncle Ray, who only shows up when someone dies or graduates, made a speech about how Savannah reminded him of her late grandmother. I stood. I waited. I held a glass. But no one passed me the mic. No one looked in my direction. Savannah didn't say my name once. A staff member came by with fresh napkins. I stopped him gently. "Hey, is there another round of toasts coming up?" He checked his list. "No, sir. Toasts just wrapped. They're prepping dessert now." "Right. Thanks." I swallowed something hard and shame-shaped. The server tilted his head. "You all right?" I nodded. "I paid for this wine," I said, too softly for him to hear. If you've ever stood in the middle of your own generosity and still been treated like an afterthought, drop a comment or let me know where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if family drama ever made you feel invisible too. I placed my untouched glass on the ledge and made for the elevator, keeping my hands in my pockets so no one would see they were trembling. Just as I reached for the call button, the lobby doors opened and in walked Dr. Chen, Dean of Students from the university. He looked out of place in the party's sparkle. No tie, just a linen jacket and an envelope in his hand. "I'm looking for Marcus Ellery," he said to the front attendant. The woman pointed toward the corner. "There." Everyone turned. I raised my hand halfway. Marcus. Dr. Chen strode over and shook my hand firmly, his voice like calm thunder. "I meant to find you earlier. Savannah told me everything you've done behind the scenes for this family. For her. I'd like to thank you formally." Eyes were on me now. He lifted the envelope. "And also inform you," he continued, "that the anonymous donor for the university's Prestige Scholars Grant has now been made public per your note. I'm honored to announce that you, Marcus Ellery, have fully endowed the first ever Valedictorian Humanities Scholarship." There was a pause, brief but seismic. Then, quiet. Everyone fell silent. Every fork hung in midair. Every wine glass floated inches from lips. Even Savannah. She turned to look at me, her face unreadable, and for the first time that evening, the entire room saw me. No one moved at first. The silence was thick, strangely reverent, awkward like a held breath. I felt the heat rising in my collar, unsure where to look. Dr. Chen patted my shoulder with a calm nod and handed me the envelope before turning back toward the elevator like he had merely delivered a parcel. No photo ops, no speech. Just a clean acknowledgement. I could hear the clink of forks returning to plates, the hum of resumed chatter, but it was slower now, like everyone was recalibrating what they thought they knew. Savannah stepped forward, her long burgundy gown catching the soft breeze. She looked exactly how a future leader is expected to look: tall posture, groomed eyebrows, a steady smile that revealed nothing. "You did that?" she asked, her voice quiet. I glanced at the envelope. I'd seen the printout already: the donation details, the award criteria, the legal unmasking of the anonymous donor. My name sat there in serif font, the way I always imagined it might appear in a footnote one day. "Yeah," I said. "It was time." She nodded slowly. "I didn't know. No one told me. Wasn't for telling." We stood facing each other, the clamor of family still muffled behind us. A part of me wanted her to cry, or hug me, or say thank you in a way that wasn't robotic. Instead, she bit the inside of her cheek and said, "Can we talk later?" "Sure," I said, even though I knew we probably wouldn't. I walked past the tables and down the stairs instead of taking the elevator. I needed the quiet, the motion, something to remind my body that I was still the same person I was before Dr. Chen spoke my name. As I pushed through the side doors into the alley, the familiar bitterness crept in, not at Savannah, not even at the family, but at how easy it is for them to remember me only when I make myself unforgettable. It had been that way for years. Growing up, I wasn't the first to win anything. Not the spelling bee, not the science fair. I wasn't the favorite, or the rebel, or the peacemaker. I wasn't a prodigy, I was a placeholder. The extra seat in the van, the cousin who played background guitar while Julian sang lead. At 13, I figured out how to fix Nana's broken irrigation pipe using duct tape, a cut hose, and some bricks. Uncle Ray said it was lucky guesswork. Savannah, a year younger, once organized the family spice rack and got applause. I learned young that invisibility wasn't a punishment, it was a side effect. So I adapted. I stopped expecting recognition. I aimed for impact instead. That's how I got into grant funding and philanthropy in the first place, because I liked the architecture of help, the invisible hands behind things. There was peace in knowing I could make someone's life change without ever being named. And yet, the moment Dr. Chen spoke my name, something inside me flickered back on like a dusty bulb that hadn't been switched in years. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath all these years, waiting to be seen. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Why didn't you tell us about the scholarship?" I stared at it. No greeting, no warmth, just interrogation. Another text followed. That could have been part of the toast. I laughed bitterly. I leaned against the cold bricks of the alley and typed back, "Guess I wasn't close family." No response. From somewhere down the block, I heard footsteps. My sister Laurel turned the corner, her heels clicking like guilt. "Hey," she said. That was a surprise. Was it? I didn't know. "Marcus, none of us knew you were behind that. I didn't need you to know," I said, then paused. "I just didn't expect to be iced out tonight." She exhaled. "I wasn't trying to exclude you. Mom said we had too many people on the list, and Savannah's side of the family already had 6. I'm your side of the family." Laurel looked down. "I'm sorry. It was rushed. I guess I figured you wouldn't mind." "I mind," I said. "I didn't fly in to be invisible." "I know," she said softly. "You were amazing. That scholarship god. Marcus. That was huge. Thanks, I said flatly. She looked at me, then really looked. You know what's sad? I think you've always done things hoping we'd notice, but we're so used to you showing up without needing attention. We forgot you might want it too. I didn't answer. The honesty stung. Laurel stepped closer. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why Savannah? I blinked. What do you mean? Of all the students. You made a scholarship in her name. Why I hesitated, watching the glint of the city in the puddle by our feet. Because she's brilliant. Because she works hard. Because despite everything, I still wanted her to feel chosen. Laurel's eyes softened. Even after all this, I nodded. Especially after all this. There was a long silence. Then she whispered. You know she always looked up to you. Right. I let out a dry laugh. Could have fooled me. She doesn't say it much. But she used to read your college essays. That year you moved out and no one called. She cried for a week. Something shifted behind my ribs. I'll see you inside, Laurel said, squeezing my arm. You still have cake to eat. She walked away, her silhouette swallowed by the party lights. I stayed in the alley, unsure whether to follow. The envelope in my hand felt heavy again, not because of what it contained, but because of what it changed. I finally walked back up, but not through the main entrance. I slipped in through the kitchen like I used to when I worked catering jobs. The smell of strawberries and burnt sugar brought back muscle memory. Near the dessert cart, a waitress noticed me and said, Sir, you missed the main cake cutting. I'm all right, I said. But as I moved into the dining area, Savannah was there holding 2 plates. One slice was chocolate mousse, the other was almond. My favorite. She handed it to me without a word. I took the plate. Our fingers brushed. We sat at the empty table near the back. She didn't toast me, but she didn't walk away either. And for now, that was enough. The music had softened into something jazzy, the kind of instrumental background track no one actually hears. Conversations grew looser as champagne took hold. The toast had passed, the cake had been sliced, and now came that slow unraveling of the night when heels were traded for flats, jackets were draped over chairs, and laughter slurred into something messy. But at our table, it was quiet. Savannah poked at the corner of her cake with the side of her fork. I noticed she hadn't taken a bite. I hadn't either. We were just sitting there, like 2 people trying to read a book they both used to know by heart, but now couldn't find the first page. I broke the silence first. So, I said, you're heading to Columbia in the fall. She nodded. Orientation starts mid-August. I got into the dual-degree humanities med program. Full ride now. Apparently. She said it carefully, with a faint, grateful smile, but there was a note of caution in her voice, like she wasn't sure if it was okay to be excited about something I had made possible. Yeah, I said. The board finalized the endowment 2 weeks ago. You're the first recipient. Her eyes scanned my face. Why didn't you tell me? I shrugged. It wasn't about me. I mean before tonight. Why keep it quiet? I took a breath, looked around at the families dancing near the DJ booth, the laughter around the bar, the clinking of wine glasses like tiny betrayals. Because I didn't want a spotlight. I just wanted you to have it, to go further than I could. She leaned forward. You've already gone further than most people I know. I gave a half smile, not in the family's eyes. Savannah tilted her head, the strands of hair falling from her updo catching the light. That's not true. It is, I said, keeping my voice low. You're the one they make scrapbooks about, the one they build slideshows for. You're the one they fly relatives in for. And I'm the one who pays the photographer's bill? Her eyes filled, but she blinked it back quickly. That's not fair. No, I said. But it's true. We sat in silence again, the chocolate on our plates softening, untouched. I could hear someone calling out for Uncle Dennis to come dance to an old Luther Vandross song. Somewhere else, glasses broke and everyone cheered. She whispered, "You could have given that scholarship to anyone. There are students with nothing, no family, no safety net. Why me?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Because you needed to know that being seen isn't the same as being valued. I figured if I gave you something without asking for credit, it would feel more real." Savannah's lips parted slightly, and I could see her thinking, really thinking, that pause before she let her polished self fall away. "You think I don't know how lucky I am," she said quietly. "But I do. It's just exhausting to be perfect all the time. I'm not allowed to fall apart. I'm not even allowed to say no. I need to." Surprised by the confession, she continued, "They don't love me. They need me to win. It keeps the illusion alive." I stared at her. "You've never said that out loud before. I've never had someone to say it to." For a moment, we weren't Savannah the Valedictorian and Marcus the invisible cousin. We were just two kids from the same type of family, quietly admitting that neither of us had ever really felt safe. She smiled gently. "Do you remember the summer we got locked in the pool house during that thunderstorm?" "Yeah," I said, grinning. "You cried for the first 20 minutes until I told you the thunder was just God bowling. You made me laugh so hard I forgot to be scared. And then you sang that weird camp song for an hour straight." Her cheeks flushed. "Hey, that song was genius." We laughed, and the sound surprised both of us. Then her voice dropped. "You were my favorite person back then." I looked down at my plate. "What happened?" "You disappeared," she said. "After Grandpa died, you just stopped coming around. I thought maybe I'd done something." I blinked. No, Savannah. It wasn't you." Then I took a deep breath. I got tired of being looked at like the family intern, always there to help, never worth celebrating. So I stepped away. Didn't even know I was grieving until I was already gone. She nodded, slowly. "I missed you," she said. I didn't answer right away. I didn't know if I could. Then I said, "I watched your speech from the back of the auditorium. You should have been in the front row. Didn't want to take attention." "You should have," she said again, firmer this time. "It was your moment too." The band started playing something slow and syrupy. Couples drifted onto the dance floor, dresses brushing against dress shoes, uncles trying to recapture their 80s rhythm. I could see Mom talking to Aunt Claudine, their expressions tight, probably about me. Laurel was leaning on Julian's shoulder, half drunk. The photo-perfect family scene. Savannah stood up, brushing imaginary lint from her dress. "Will you dance with me?" I hesitated. "People will talk." "Let them," she said. "You paid for the damn music." I laughed, then took her hand. As we moved to the floor, the family turned. They watched not with the same blank dismissal from earlier, but with curiosity, with unease, with acknowledgement. Aunt Claudine whispered something to Mom, who blinked and looked away. Uncle Ray nodded, as if finally recognizing me, and in the center of it all, we danced. Nothing flashy, just enough movement to stay warm, to stay real. "Thank you," she whispered. I shook my head. "Don't thank me. Just become someone who never forgets the people in the background." She nodded against my shoulder. The song faded. Applause followed, and Savannah curtsied dramatically. I took a small bow. A few claps came our way, not many, but enough. We left the floor quietly. As we walked back to the table, Julian stepped in front of me. "Hey," he said, voice low. That was cool. Man. I nodded. Thanks. Then, unexpectedly, he added, I didn't know you were doing all that for Savannah. I guess I underestimated you. Yeah, I said. A lot of people do. He offered a sheepish smile. Maybe we should catch up sometime. Maybe. He walked off. One by one, others came. A cousin with a half apology, an aunt with soft eyes and a squeeze of the hand. It wasn't fanfare. It wasn't fireworks. But it was something. A shift. Later that night, when the rooftop emptied out and the staff began to fold linens and box desserts, Savannah and I stood at the edge of the terrace, looking out at the skyline. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small, crumpled paper. What's that? My speech, she said. The one I didn't give. You didn't speak. She shook her head. I was supposed to, but I couldn't find the words that felt honest. Not until tonight. She handed me the paper. I read the top line. To the person who taught me that value isn't volume, thank you. Maybe next time, she said. I folded the paper gently and slid it into my jacket. There were no more toasts. But this was better. The next morning, the hotel lobby smelled like burnt espresso and old cologne. Someone had spilled a cappuccino near the check-in counter, and a bellhop was half-heartedly blotting it with folded napkins. I waited by the glass doors with my suitcase, watching sunlight bounce off the polished floor tiles in flickers that made my eyes ache. My train wasn't for another hour, but I had to get out of the suite early. Too many voices, too many versions of last night already being rewritten in whispers across rooms. Savannah had texted me before sunrise. You changed everything. I mean that. I hadn't responded yet. Across the lobby, Aunt Claudine appeared, carrying her garment bag like it held something fragile and sacred. She spotted me, hesitated, then approached with the same deliberate pace she used when crossing wet marble. Marcus, she said, you're leaving early. Train's at 10. I replied, easier to get to the station before the morning rush. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder. About last night? It's okay. I interrupted gently. Really? She frowned. It's not okay. You should have been part of the toast. We missed that. I smiled faintly. You didn't miss it. You chose it. Her face flinched just slightly, just enough. Then she sighed. You were always quiet. We assumed you preferred to stay behind the curtain. Sometimes I did, but not always. Well, she cleared her throat. For what it's worth, Savannah told me you're the reason she could afford her program. That's monumental. Marcus, we're proud of you. I nodded, even though I knew she was just now realizing she should be. The lobby doors opened and Uncle Ray strolled in with sunglasses on, though we were still inside. He gave me a nod, half salute, half afterthought. I checked the time and wheeled my bag toward the curb. A voice called out behind me. Marcus. It was Mom, breathless, clutching her phone and a crumpled tissue like she'd just run from something unresolved. Can we talk before you go? I paused. I'm about to grab a car. It won't take long. She guided me to the sitting area just outside the breakfast buffet, where hotel music drifted in soft elevator tones. She sat first, smoothing her skirt like it mattered. I heard what you did, she began, about the scholarship, and the funding, and everything. I said nothing. I'm sorry we didn't acknowledge it. I'm sorry we didn't acknowledge you. She looked at me, searching. I always thought you didn't want the spotlight, she said. You were never like Julian, or Savannah. You never pushed to be center stage. Maybe I thought you'd find me anyway. Her lips parted, then closed again. That kind of mother silence where regret pools but pride can't quite find a path out. You were always the glue. she whispered. We didn't say it. We should have. I watched her struggle with her next words. So I helped her. Mom, I said softly. You don't have to perform a eulogy. I'm not gone. She laughed, then wiped the corner of her eye. I didn't need a performance. Just presence. Just this. Thank you, she said, for staying close even when we didn't deserve it. We sat for another minute. Then I stood. As I reached for my bag, she added, Call me when you get there. And next time, stay longer. I might, I said, though I didn't promise. Outside, the air was already heating up. My ride pulled up a silver sedan with tinted windows and an elderly driver who smiled too hard. I slid into the back seat and let the door close like sealing off a chapter. Through the glass, I saw the hotel growing smaller in the mirror, the rooftop, the terrace. The frozen expressions from last night, it all shrank into nothingness behind me. I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. I just felt free. The station was loud, but not chaotic. My train wasn't boarding yet, so I grabbed a coffee and sat near the edge of the platform, people watching. A boy in a dinosaur backpack sobbed while his dad tried to explain what a platform meant. A woman with paint-stained overalls read a novel upside down, lost in some internal conversation. Everyone was going somewhere, but no one looked like they had truly arrived. I checked my phone again. A new text from Savannah. Can I call you this weekend? I want to tell you what I'm planning. I typed back, Of course. I want to hear all of it. Then another message buzzed in, this time from Julian. When you get home, let's talk. I have an idea I think you'll want in on. I raised my eyebrows. That was unexpected. I didn't know what kind of idea Julian had. He wasn't exactly the type to collaborate with anyone who wasn't already in his image. But maybe last night had opened something. A door, at least. The train pulled in. I boarded and found my seat, placing the envelope from Dr. Chen in my lap. I hadn't opened it again since that moment on the rooftop. I unfolded it now, reading through the official letterhead, the language of endowment, the legal recognition. But it was the last paragraph that stayed with me. In recognition of your discretion and service to underrepresented scholars, the board has agreed to establish the Ellery Humanitarian Citation. It will be awarded each year to an alumnus who changes lives quietly. Quietly. I smiled. The train lurched forward. Cityscape faded into fields, and fields into nothing. I leaned my head against the glass, letting the rhythmic clatter of tracks soothe something tender. Memories surfaced, uninvited. Dad sitting at the kitchen table, nodding quietly as Savannah read her poem. Me in the hallway, holding a science trophy no one asked about. Laurel forgetting my birthday again and sending me a passive text 2 days later. But also Savannah sneaking me an extra cupcake at Nana's funeral. Julian once sticking up for me in a cafeteria fight. Mom tucking a $20 bill into my coat pocket on my first job interview. It was never all bad. It was just never seen. Now. Maybe it would be, not through speeches, not through photo slideshows, but through actions that whispered, not shouted, and that was enough. The sun slanted across the window, and I let my eyes close, not in exhaustion, but in peace, behind my eyelids. I saw Savannah smiling as she danced. Not the practiced one, the real one. I saw the envelope being opened next year by another kid who'd never think they were chosen until someone proved otherwise. I saw my name, not in lights, but in the margins, where I'd always belonged. But this time, intentionally, I breathed in, and this time, I didn't hold it. The weeks that followed returned me to my normal rhythm, quiet office mornings, emails about grant cycles and donor restrictions, budget spreadsheets with color-coded anxiety, But something had shifted. I couldn't name it at first. It wasn't confidence. Exactly. And it wasn't revenge. It felt like breathing through a door I'd always assumed was locked. I started walking to work again, even in the summer heat. Something about hearing my own footsteps on the sidewalk gave my mind room to unravel the noise. I wasn't checking my phone every 5 minutes. I wasn't thinking of family birthdays I'd probably be excluded from again. I was just living. That Friday. My phone rang just as I sat down with a bowl of lentil soup and a piece of toast. It was Savannah. "Hey," I answered. "Are you free?" she asked, out of breath. "I mean, do you have time to hear something completely wild?" "Go." I turned down the Columbia offer. I froze. "Wait. What I mean? I didn't say no exactly." She rushed to clarify. I deferred. "For a year. I need time. Space. To figure out what I want." "Savannah, are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," she said. "I've been thinking about it for a long time, but I was scared. I thought I owed the family that success story, but I've already proven I can get there. Now I want to prove I can walk away and still be myself." I sat back in my chair. "So, what now?" "I'm going to apply for a community fellowship in East Oakland," she said. "They do humanities-driven healing programs for teens, especially kids with incarcerated parents. I want to work with them, just for a year, maybe 2. That's incredible." "You inspired it," she said. I blinked. "How?" "Because you showed me that doing something meaningful doesn't need to be framed in gold. It can happen in the margins." Quietly, I exhaled. "You sure you're not just quoting my scholarship letter?" She laughed. "Maybe a little." There was silence on the line, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of pause that says we've turned a corner. "I'm proud of you," I said. "You said that to me when I graduated." She replied, "But this is the first time it feels real." After we hung up, I sat at the table long after the toast went cold. I wasn't sad. I wasn't afraid for her. I was simply in awe. There's a specific kind of beauty when someone breaks the story written for them and writes something no one expected. That weekend, I got a voicemail from Julian. "Hey, that idea I mentioned, I want to start a community studio for underrepresented creatives. Art, photography, music, all in one place. But I need someone who knows how to get funding. Grants, endowments, whatever. I know we haven't exactly collaborated before, but I think this could be big. Let's talk." I didn't delete it. I didn't even hesitate. I texted her. "Let's meet Monday. Your place." If you'd asked me a month ago whether I'd ever work with Julie, I would have laughed and changed the subject. But something about that toastless night had unstuck us both from the painless script. We were finally talking like grown men, not brothers stuck in childhood hierarchies. Monday came. I arrived early. His apartment was nicer than I expected. Exposed brick, soft lighting, a record player that actually worked. We sat on the balcony with iced coffee and a whiteboard he'd dragged outside like he was pitching to investors. "This isn't about money," he said, gesturing with a marker. "It's about giving them access, cameras, software, mentors. Most of these kids have ideas but no tools. And the studio space. Still looking. There's an old bakery in Elmwood that shut down last year. Might be affordable." I nodded. "And you're okay letting me take over funding structure?" He grinned. "Bro, I've seen your spreadsheets. They scare me. In a good way." We laughed. For the first time in years, it didn't feel forced. I went home that afternoon and wrote the pitch for our first donor meeting. 3 weeks later, we had our first check. By September, Savannah moved into a tiny one-bedroom near her new fellowship office. We FaceTimed every Sunday. Sometimes she looked exhausted. Sometimes she looked radiant. sometimes both. One Sunday, she called from a city bus with loud salsa music playing behind her. "I just gave a poetry workshop to kids who thought Shakespeare was a TikTok handle," she said. I laughed. "That's amazing." "They made me cry," she added, voice cracking. In a good way. She turned the phone around. The bus windows showed murals flashing past, stories on concrete, names in bold spray paint. I couldn't hear what she was saying anymore over the wind noise. But I didn't need to. I saw her. Not the valedictorian, not the family miracle. Just Savannah. Alive. At Thanksgiving, I returned home. No rooftop this time. Just the old house with creaky floorboards and gravy-stained placemats. I wore jeans and a sweater. No one made a slideshow. But when I walked in, Mom hugged me first. Laurel handed me a plate already filled. Julian pulled me aside and said, "Our second donor signed last week. They're matching funds." And Savannah, she stood up from the couch, made room beside her, and handed me a blanket. That night, after dinner, someone suggested we go around and say what we were grateful for. Everyone groaned, but we did it anyway, one by one. When it got to Savannah, she said, "I'm thankful for the people who show up even when no one's looking, especially him." She nodded at me. "This year changed because of you." I didn't say anything. I just looked at her, then down at my plate, then at everyone else. Then I said, "I'm thankful for second drafts. Sometimes the first version of a family forgets you, but if you're lucky, you get to rewrite it." They were quiet. Then Aunt Claudine clapped. Mom followed. Everyone else joined in, not because it was expected, but because it was earned. Later that night, Savannah and I stood outside on the porch. The air was cold. The stars were scattered above like spilled sugar. She said, "Did you ever think we'd be like this again?" "No," I said. "But I hoped." She took a deep breath. "I might not go back to Columbia." I turned to her. "I love what I'm doing," she said. "I feel real." Maybe that's enough. I didn't respond with advice. I just nodded. We stayed outside until our noses went numb. Back inside, the family was playing some old board game they always cheated at. But they were laughing, and they kept asking me to join. I didn't need a toast anymore. I had something better. A seat. One I didn't have to earn by bleeding. One that waited for me when I came back. By winter. The studio Julian and I built had a name, Common Light. We didn't argue over it. He brought it up casually one night over takeout. "What about something that means, like, shared vision?" And it just stuck. No debate. No drama. Just agreement. Which was new for us. We rented the old bakery for cheap, thanks to a sympathetic landlord who'd lost her son to the system and liked the idea of something useful replacing what used to be frosting and burnt croissants. The space still smelled faintly like sugar and smoke. We kept that smell. On our first day open, the kids trickled in slowly. Word had spread through a few local schools, mostly whispers and curiosity. There was no launch party. Just a handwritten sign taped to the glass. "Create here. It's free." One boy named Jarrell asked if he had to audition. "No," I told him. "You just have to show up." He stared like I was trying to trick him. But he returned the next day with a notebook full of drawings. Julian and I divided duties the way we always should have. He handled the people, the mentoring, the laughter, the part where kids showed up with questions he knew how to make interesting. I handled the backbone, the donors, the invoices, the legal permits, the invisible scaffolding. I liked it that way. I didn't need applause. Still, every once in a while, someone would turn to me and say, "Wait, are you the Marcus?" And I'd smile and shrug and say, "Just the paperwork guy." But in their eyes, I saw something different. Recognition. It wasn't fame. It wasn't spotlight. It was something smaller and steadier. That winter, Savannah invited me to speak at her fellowship's community night. She said the kids wanted to hear from someone who wasn't a performer but still mattered. I wore my only clean button-down and brought no slides, no agenda, just showed up. Talked about the kind of success no one claps for. Talked about what it feels like to be skipped, erased, unmentioned, and how sometimes that's the seed of something better. When I finished, one of the girls in the back raised her hand and said, "So you're like, invisible on purpose?" I laughed. Sometimes. But only when I choose it. They clap for me. I didn't expect it. I didn't need it. But I let them do it. Afterwards. Savannah hugged me in the hallway. Tight and warm and not performative. "You saved my life," she said. "You already had the map." I replied. "I just reminded you to read it." At home, I framed the letter from Dr. Chen, the official one with the board seal and the language that used to intimidate me. I didn't hang it in the living room. I put it in the hallway, somewhere I'd see it in passing, not on display. One night in January, Julian came over with paint-stained hands and said, "You remember that toast I looked up from my laptop?" "Which one? The one where they skipped you?" "Hard to forget." "Well," he said, handing me a wrapped box. "This is the opposite of that." I opened it. Inside was a photo taken at Thanksgiving. Me and Savannah on the porch. Mid-laugh. It wasn't framed. Just printed and placed in the box like a thank you note. "Figured you should remember the version of us that actually worked," he said. I stared at the picture. We looked like siblings, like family, like people who chose each other on purpose. Julian poured himself a glass of orange juice and flopped onto the couch. "You think we'll mess this up?" I laughed. "The studio, everything. This. Trying. We probably will," I said. "At some point. But we'll try again." He nodded. "That's new." "Yeah," I said. "It is." By spring, Savannah's program got featured in a local paper. They didn't name me. I didn't mind. She sent me a photo of the headline, "Poetry Saved Me. One fellow's fight to keep kids dreaming." I texted back. "They should have called it, 'She's just getting started.'" She replied with a single emoji, a spark. We still talked every Sunday. She was planning a youth retreat in the mountains for kids who had never left the city. I offered to fund it anonymously. She said no. "This one," she told me, "needs my name on the check." "Good," I said. "Now you get it." She laughed. "You taught me how." On my birthday, my real one. Not the one they used to forget. Julian and Savannah threw a dinner for me. Nothing huge. Just 8 of us. Friends. Not just family. There was no toast. But after dessert, Savannah clinked her spoon against her glass. I rolled my eyes. "Really, shut up," she said, smiling. "Let me." Everyone quieted. She stood. "I won't make this long. I just want to say that Marcus is the reason I learned how to speak without being spoken for. He taught me what power looks like when it doesn't need permission. And if you're lucky enough to know him, you already know he's the reason good things get built and no one ever asks who built them." There was a pause. Then Julian added, "Also, he's the only guy I trust with money." Everyone laughed. I raised my glass and said nothing. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I finally didn't need to prove I belonged. I belonged. Not in the toast. Not in the photo album. But here. In the lives I had shaped. In the rooms where my name didn't have to be said for my fingerprints to be everywhere. Later that night, as I cleaned up the plates and everyone filtered out into the street, Savannah stayed behind to help wrap leftovers. "You know," she said, sealing a container of roasted carrots, "you're not invisible anymore." I wasn't invisible, I replied. I was waiting for people to open their eyes. She smiled. Well, we're wide awake now. I looked at her older, bolder, finally her own. I'm proud of you, I said again. I'm proud of us, she replied. The porch light buzzed. The night felt thick with good silence. She leaned in. You think we'll ever be that kind of family? The kind that gets it right from the start? I shook my head. No, but we're the kind that rewrites. That counts for something. We hugged quietly. No applause, no spotlight, just warmth, just being seen. April gave way to May, and with it came another graduation season. Campus lawns were once again littered with folding chairs, white tents, and helium balloons shaped like the number of the year. The smell of freshly printed programs mingled with the heavy bloom of early summer. I hadn't planned on attending any ceremonies this year. I was content behind the scenes, watching from a respectful distance. But then I received an envelope. Not a digital invite. Not a forwarded message from a family group chat. A real, embossed, handwritten envelope delivered to my office mailbox, the kind that made you pause before opening it. Inside was a single card. No photos, no decoration, just 2 sentences in Savannah's looping. Elegant handwriting, I'm speaking again. I'd like you to be there this time. Front row. Below that, a date, a time, the name of a local community center. Not a university. No gown, no cap, no hierarchy. Still, I wore a blazer. The room wasn't grand, just a modest multi-purpose space with plastic chairs and string lights zigzagging across the ceiling. There were maybe 100 people there, most of them parents holding phones in shaky hands, or teens dressed in whatever they'd found that looked semi-formal. At the front was a stage built from 2 pushed-together risers, a microphone, a folding podium, and Savannah. She stood in a long blue dress with sneakers underneath, a lapel pin shaped like an open book glinting under the string lights. As she stepped to the mic, the room stilled. No music, no slideshow, just her voice. This isn't a graduation, she began. And I'm not a valedictorian this time. I'm not here because I won something. I'm here because I stayed. Because I listened. Because I got it wrong more than once, and came back anyway. She scanned the room slowly. There's someone here today who once told me that silence can be a kind of love. That showing up without needing credit is a form of grace. I didn't understand it at first, but now I do. I sat in the front row, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't know where she was taking this. I didn't expect her to name me. She didn't. She continued. For a long time, I thought being seen meant being celebrated, being loud, being obvious. But some of the people who changed my life the most did so without ever raising their hand. They built things, protected spaces, lit fires, and stepped back. Then she smiled. This is for them. She raised a small certificate into the air. I want to honor someone today. In return, a student who didn't apply, who didn't ask, who probably doesn't even know this is coming. A girl in the 3rd row gasped as her name was called. Savannah walked down from the stage and handed her the envelope personally. No red carpet, no spotlight, just a quiet transfer of belief. The room exploded in applause, and I found myself clapping too, harder than I expected. As the crowd filed out later, kids hugging their parents, Savannah walked over to me. I didn't name you, she said, but you were in every sentence. I know, I said. That's why it worked. We sat in the back as the chairs were stacked, watching people leave. There was no ceremony left to attend. Just life. That night, I walked home instead of taking the train. The air was thick with warmth and the scent of pavement and promise. Every block felt like a reminder that something had changed suddenly. but for good. I stopped by the studio before heading in. Common light was empty. Of course it was Saturday night, but I had keys and rituals. Inside, the mural wall was still drying. A collage of hand pencils started spreading across one side during Saturday. The kids were building their own hall of fame. No faces, just inkpens. I walked through slowly, touching the chair, the camera cords, this was the kind of legacy that never made it into yearbooks. I opened my laptop at the front desk and saw an unread message from a foundation we'd pitched to last quarter. Their board had approved our expansion grant. Enough money to open 2 new studios by next year. I didn't cheer. I just exhaled long, deep, quiet. That's how real things begin. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Laurel. Mom wants to do a family dinner next weekend. Just us. No slideshow, no speeches, just you in the chair, not behind the scenes. I stared at the screen. Then I wrote back. As long as the chair has my name on it this time. She replied instantly. It will, at the dinner. The table was smaller than before. Just Mom, Laurel, Julian, me. No formal wear, no planned agenda, just food, laughter, and a pie that burned slightly on one edge because no one set a timer. Julian brought a bottle of wine and told a story about a student who tried to turn his art project into a rap video. Mom actually laughed out loud. Laurel made jokes about her dating life, and no one judged her. And me, I just listened. Listened and felt the way something old had finally softened. Halfway through the meal, Mom reached for my hand and said, "This is how it should have always been." I didn't say anything, but I held her hand back. Later, as we washed dishes together, she whispered, "I see you now." "I know," I said. She looked relieved, like she'd finally stepped into the same room as me, after all these years of peeking through the door. On my walk home, I passed a bus stop where 2 teenagers were arguing about lyrics. One of them wore a hoodie with the Common Light logo. I didn't stop him. I didn't say anything. I just kept walking, letting the moment pass like wind, because I didn't need to be noticed anymore. Not when the things I built were moving on their own. That week, Savannah mailed me a copy of a poem one of her students wrote. It read, "Some people walk into your life without doors. They don't knock. They don't shout. They hold the walls up from the inside, and you don't notice until the storm passes and nothing has collapsed." On the back, she'd scribbled, "That's you. Always." I slipped the paper into the back of a journal and didn't frame it. Not everything needed to be on display. By the end of June, Common Light had a wait list. Not just of kids, but volunteers, mentors, artists, people who wanted in, not because we promised miracles, but because the silence of our work had begun to echo. It turns out, when you build without bragging, people listen more closely, and when you make space for others to speak, your own voice starts to matter more. Not louder, just deeper. On the anniversary of the graduation toast, the one they skipped, me and Savannah sent me a picture. It was of a cake. Simple white icing. No decorations. But on the top, written in black frosting, were 6 small words. "We didn't skip you this time." I laughed so hard I cried. And that night, I lit a candle, not to celebrate, but to remember the moment everything shifted, the moment silence finally spoke. July came in slow, the kind of thick, sticky heat that made every surface feel a few degrees too close. I didn't mind it. I liked walking during the hottest part of the afternoon when the city emptied a little and everything felt sunburnt and honest, the kind of weather that strips things down. No pretense, just sweat and breath and gravity. Common Light was closed for summer maintenance that week. We were repainting the back room and reorganizing supplies. Julian had taken a few days off to visit our dad in Vermont, a relationship he was finally starting to rebuild. Savannah was out of town too, speaking at a conference in New Orleans about the intersection of literature and healing. I was alone for the first time in weeks. It was peaceful. That Wednesday, I got an email from a student named Camilla who had been coming to the studio since February, 16, always wearing oversized headphones, always scribbling poetry in the margins of her sketchbook. Her email was short. Subject: thanks. I used to think quiet people were just afraid. Then I met you. I think maybe they're just deeper. That was it. No attachments, no emojis. Just that. I read it twice, then once more out loud. It didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like someone who'd seen me, and somehow, that was rarer than praise. Later that day, I visited the rooftop of the Winslow Hotel. I don't know why, exactly. Maybe to see if the skyline had changed. Maybe to prove to myself that I could stand in the exact spot where they once skipped me and feel nothing break. The terrace was empty. No parties. Just a few sun-faded lounge chairs and a couple of seagulls circling overhead. I stood where the toast had happened, where Savannah had turned, where Dr. Chen had said my name, and the room had fallen silent. It looked smaller now, not physically, but in memory. That night had once loomed like a jagged shadow across my whole sense of self. Now, it felt like a snapshot, important. Yes, but no longer defining. I sat down at the edge of the terrace and watched the clouds move. I thought about the version of me who stood here, glass in hand, waiting for a mic that never came. I wanted to reach back and tell him, you're going to be more than their omission. A few days later, Savannah came back from New Orleans and sent me a voice memo. I played it while walking through the empty studio. Her voice was hoarse from talking but still warm. Hey, I met someone down here who said she heard about the scholarship. She asked if you were real or just some anonymous funding myth. I told her you were real and quiet, but loud in the right ways. She asked what that meant. I said, he's the kind of person who disappears into a room and somehow makes everyone else more visible. The message ended with a long pause. Then she whispered, you changed me. I leaned against the wall beside the mural and let the echo fill me. Sometimes, the impact is not measured in applause, but in who we give courage to. That weekend, the studio reopened. New lights, fresh paint, everything a little shinier. Jarrell showed up early and brought his younger cousin. He gave him a tour like he owned the place. I watched from the corner as he showed off the sound booth, the sticker wall, the free snack basket we kept stocked with fruit chews and instant noodles. He pointed to the mural of handprints. That's where we leave, who we used to be. I smiled. Later that afternoon, a quiet girl named Ayana asked if she could add her name under one of the handprints. I said yes, of course. She picked one near the top and wrote in tiny block letters, "Still becoming." That stayed with me. By the end of August, Savannah's fellowship offered her a full-time director role. She called me in the middle of the night, giddy and breathless. "They want me to stay," she said. "Not just to teach, but to lead. They trust me." I laughed into the pillow. That's what happens when you stop asking for permission. I didn't even cry this time. She said, "You will." She did. But this time, it was from joy. At the start of September, Julian and I hosted our first open mic night at Common Light. The room was packed. Kids with notebooks, guitars, spoken word pieces, beatboxing, parents, siblings, strangers. Savannah showed up halfway through and sat beside me in the back, recording on her phone. When one student forgot his lines and froze, the room didn't laugh. They clapped, cheered. Someone from the crowd shouted, "We've got you." He smiled and started over. That was it. That's what we'd built. As fall rolled in and the nights got colder, I found myself walking home with a different kind of silence, not the kind that hurts, the kind that heals. One night, I passed a bookstore and saw something taped in the window, a flyer for a youth anthology being published by Savannah's organization. The title, Letters to the Ones Who Stayed Quiet. I walked in and bought 2 copies, one for the studio shelf, one for my hallway table, next to the framed letter from Dr. Chen. Inside the book, Savannah had written a dedication. For M.E. You gave us room to speak. Now we carry your quiet forward. I didn't cry. I just stood there, the way you stand, when something inside you finally sits down. In October, Laurel sent me a picture from the family group chat I'd forgotten I was still in. It was a photo of a new baby Julian's. Apparently, he hadn't said anything yet. Classic him. Under the photo, Mom had written, "Meet Everly Rose Ellery, born into a family that's finally learning how to notice." I stared at the image. Tiny hand, big yawn, a name that sounded like light. Laurel texted me separately a moment later. She already has your quiet eyes. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I liked the idea. By November, the family planned another gathering. Not formal, no speeches, just a meal. And this time, they asked me to bring someone. Not a partner, not a date. Just someone I thought mattered. I brought Jarrell, 15, nervous, wearing his best hoodie and asking me if my family would think he was weird. They're not the ones who built a music library from scratch. I told him, "You belong more than most." At the dinner, Mom sat him beside her. Laurel made him laugh. Julian gave him a knuckle tap. And Savannah pulled me aside and whispered, "Now you're doing it for someone else." I looked at Jarrell across the room, wide-eyed and full of too much hope. "I always was," I said. That night, on the porch again, Savannah asked, "Do you think they finally see you?" I paused, then answered, "I think I finally stopped needing them to." She smiled, and that's when they started. We watched the stars again, the ones that never need applause to shine. Winter didn't come with drama that year. No dramatic storms, no surprise illnesses, no family implosions over burnt casseroles. It was just cold and slow. The way winter is supposed to be. I liked it that way. Everything in my life had been loud in quiet ways for so long, I finally needed something still. Common Light stayed open through December, even as schools closed for break. We called it our warm room week. No projects, no lectures, just a place to be. We brought in extra beanbags, hot cocoa in paper cups, blank sketch pads, open space. One afternoon, Gerald brought Everly to the studio. Julian needed a last-minute sitter, and Gerald volunteered. He was shockingly good at it, rocking her stroller with one foot while sampling beats on his phone, whispering things like, "You ever heard a kick drum make a baby nap?" It worked. When I looked at them, his headphones half on, her pacifier bobbing, I felt something I hadn't expected. Legacy. Not the grand kind. The small, private kind. The kind you plant in people. Not headlines. That night, I stayed late at the studio. Everyone had gone home. The string lights above the mural buzzed faintly, and the heater ticked in slow rhythm. I walked the room slowly, one last time before the year ended. My phone buzzed with a text from Savannah. I just submitted the manuscript. It's real now. She'd been working on a book, a mix of memoir, student stories, and essays on quiet leadership. I knew she didn't want to center herself. I also knew she'd done it anyway, because some things are meant to be held in the light eventually. I texted back, "The world needs to hear you. Even when you whisper, Christmas with the family was quieter too. No speeches, no toasts, just a fireplace, matching pajamas. Yes, I wore them, and Julian pretending not to cry while Everly tried mashed potatoes for the first time. At one point, Mom handed me a wrapped box with no tag. Inside was a photo album, not of Savannah, not of Julian, of me, clippings, letters, photos she'd saved quietly, privately, all these years. My first school award, the article from the Foundation's newsletter, a blurry photo of me at the rooftop that night, standing near the edge, looking out, and on the first page, in her handwriting, "You were always the story. We just weren't ready to read it." I didn't say anything. I just closed the book and hugged her. Some things don't need to be spoken anymore. In early January, I stood in front of a group of new students at Common Light. Some nervous, some pretending not to be, some already guarding themselves from the possibility that this would be another place that didn't see them. I said, "You don't have to prove anything to be here. Not your pain, not your talent. You just have to show up." One of the girls raised her hand and asked, "Are you the founder?" I paused, then smiled. "I'm the quiet part." They all looked confused, but Jarrell, who was sitting in the corner helping hang coats, nodded. He said, "He's the reason all of this works." That night, I walked home alone, cold air stinging the inside of my nose, the streets mostly empty, the city twinkling like it didn't need anyone to notice to be beautiful. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of water, took off my coat, and sat on the floor beside the bookshelf. I reached behind the stack of poetry books and pulled out the folded notes Savannah had written months ago. "You gave me something no one else did." I read it once more, then placed it back without unfolding it all the way. That's how memory works best, not framed, not rewritten, but gently visited. I lay down on the floor and stared at the ceiling. No thoughts of revenge, no need for recognition, just air in my lungs and peace in my chest. There were no more toasts to interrupt, no more speeches to miss. Only people, only presence, and that quiet, steady knowing that the work had been worth it, that I had not been skipped, that I had written myself into every life I touched, not with a mic, not with a spotlight, but with the kind of light that doesn't need a stage, the kind that stays,